Hello, hello. Thank everybody for being here today. Today, we're lucky enough to get to speak with author Thomas Howard Riley about his story, The Light of Kasaban. And first and foremost, it's a bleak story, but it was really well written. It was one of those dystopian elements. You have the family aspect to it, but it was just you were really rooting for the characters throughout the story. You really didn't want bad things to happen. You really wanted to see them come out of it in a better light. And it was really cool to kind of, I think, especially within the self-publishing sphere that we've been reading as of late, we have a lot of characters that we don't love. Whereas in this instance, it was hard to not love every character that you wrote, especially there were so many and they all stood out in different ways.
Apart from Carda, apart
Yeah.
from the
Oh,
priest.
of course.
Yeah,
That's villain.
apart from the actual bad guys, yeah.
So thanks for having me, guys. Again, sorry for my voice. I'm still recovering from before, but so I hope I'm audible enough. But yeah, it's with Light of Kasaban, it was kind of interesting because my usual MO is to have fairly morally gray characters in my other published works and the works that I'm going to be publishing this year. The characters are a lot more morally gray. Um, but and oddly enough, so I wanted to write a character that was rooted in kindness and a character who was very good, like had a good center to them. And ironically, I put them in the worst possible fantasy environment imaginable because she lives in a city that's been basically taken over by a hostile, religious order, and is stuck in this kind of dystopian nightmare. Uh, but yeah, it was really interesting to write a character that was that genuine and did everything from the heart, and see how she was able to strive and struggle through that terrible environment.
I think, especially with a story that features children so prominently, children are a bit like animals, like dogs and cats in that way, where if children sense that something's off about someone, they can tell a mile away. They're pretty good judges of character and they tend to just say what's on their mind. There was a lot of instances in the story where the kids are quite blunt with Sire, are quite forthright with her.
Yes, yeah, I have two children of my own, and I have plenty nieces and nephews. I know exactly how blunt they can be, and so I wanted to make sure that that shined through as well in the child characters.
So I think before I even get into The Light of Kasaban, this is not the first Thomas Howard Riley book that I've read. As you know, I'm sure I read The Monsters That We Feed, or just The Monsters We Feed, which I think is behind you right now.
Oh yeah,
And
I've got
really,
both up there.
yeah, The
Oh,
Monsters We Feed. There we
and
go.
and We Break Immortals as well, which was my debut. And Monsters We Feed, and then Light of Kasaban. Speaking of morally gray characters, Monsters We Feed definitely has morally gray protagonists compared to Saya from Light of Kasaban.
Oh goodness, yeah. And I really loved The Monsters We Feed. We actually wanted to feature it. The reason that we didn't was because of the spoilers, because of the extremely graphic sex scenes in some parts, which is
Well,
something that I'll try.
it is a noir, like a fantasy medieval noir story. So I did have to lean into the noir. So there are a couple of scenes, but ironically, I get a lot of praise from people for how well those
Yeah,
scenes are written. But yeah, they are uh, they do go there. They don't fade to black. So
yeah. I really love them. I've got no issue with them. It's just one of those things we have to consider with our
mm,
audience. But
sure,
Light of
yeah, Light of
Kasaban,
Casaban is much better in
yeah,
that area because it doesn't there it's a very streamlined story and there's not it doesn't have that noir vibe.
mm,
So it was much more focused on the singular character, and a lot of the main characters relationships are with people who have already passed, like, so it's experiencing the memories of those relationships, of parents, friends, lovers, of in the past. There's very few people left who are on Saya's side in Light of Kasaban. So it, she experiences a lot of it through her memory of those people.
which in itself
When it
was
came to the, sorry, go
I
Ryan.
was just gonna say, which in itself is interesting because a lot of the story was through flashbacks. Or like you saw moments where, well, I mean, Saya is very much the adult in the room, but we very much get into the whole she can't switch off. She has to be at 110% all the time, or obviously there's really negative, like there's really bad consequences. And then you see her kind of getting lost in the past and this and that because it's her only real escape to the reality she's in now. It doesn't feel like, yeah, you've created this environment where it doesn't feel like there is an escape. It doesn't feel like there is an out, which was interesting in itself as well.
Yeah, I wanted to start the story without showing her prior trauma explicitly. I wanted it to be a more streamlined story showing that she has already worked to establish ways to fight the situation she's in and ways to circumvent the horrible circumstances. Um, so that she right from the get-go you understand that she's a person who has put a great deal of thought, effort, and struggle into this all these activities that she's doing to keep the kids safe and her students safe. She's a teacher, so um, so yeah, it is tough for her to find moments in the real world outside of just any playful moments she has with her students. Everything else, you're looking over your shoulder all the time. Everywhere you are, there's always informants out looking for you, people looking to turn you in, people looking to take advantage of you financially. Um, so I mean, she basically has one real friend on her side, and that's Tarek, the
Shopkeep.
operator proprietor of a store of strange goods, uh, type of a shopkeep. That's pretty much her only remaining tie to the city outside of her little compound that she's walled off from the rest of the city.
I think it spoke to the feeling and the vibe that you were going for, that so many of the interactions she has with other people, even I know we touched on kind of like sex and that things of that nature in your other books, and this one it felt more like it was a danger. People wanted things from her, including that. Like it was a very, although the story's about young people, it's a world that doesn't care how young they are or how vulnerable they are. It's always looking to take advantage of them in one way or another. I always felt really like quite afraid for Saya's safety, even though she's got her magic and everything. Even using the magic is like suffocatingly dangerous. Like every time you do it, you got to wash your hands, you got to clean yourself off and everything. Someone's always tracking you. It really felt like there was no escape. Truly, truly desperate situation. And I know we'll go right into spoilers because if you haven't read The Light of Kasaban or any of the other Lumina World books, go
Yeah,
read
read
them
them.
because they're phenomenal. Especially if you like Jeff Vandermeer, China Mabel, kind of like big, dark, noir kind of fantasy. But I loved how absolutely horrifyingly bleak it felt at times. Even like the heat in Casaban, the sunlight is so blindingly bright. Everything felt like it was quite hostile, apart from this one little oasis of goodness. It's interesting that we touched on that you've got kids and you understand that kind of how blunt they can be. Because I used to be a teacher, and when I realised that the story was about a teacher, I thought, I'll see how close he gets it, and nail on the head, perfect. Like mostly just try to stop them hurting themselves and each other.
Yep, that's 99% of my life as a parent currently is trying to just keep people from doing dangerous things without hurting themselves, as without trying to limit them too much, but at the same time, every second you're an instant away from disaster. So
While we're on the
and that's
subject of
and that's
children,
in a and that's in and that's in a everyday situation. So you can imagine the stresses of a parent, because she's not just their teacher; she's a surrogate parent for these kids.
yeah,
Like she's basically an adopted mother for these kids, and so she's a stressed out parent
yeah,
who's also a teacher, who on top of that has to always be looking over her shoulder in the wider situation in her environment. So it's just there's so many weights on her shoulders. So that I hope her strength showed through in dealing
Oh,
with all of those
it it certainly
situations.
it certainly did, but I do think it was just this element of you didn't, at least I was reading this, I didn't see a future for anybody. I didn't see how they were gonna claw out of this. I didn't see how like just life was gonna go on. Like the kids are gonna get older, they're gonna get stronger, sure, but you're still up against the machine, and the
Hmm.
machine's not gonna like the machine's also
Yeah.
gonna get stronger.
And
Um,
she touches on that too at a certain point in the
Yeah.
story. She comes to a revelation that, oh God, these kids are growing up. I'm starting to encounter situation, because for all this time I've had mostly students who are like, or kids who are like, very young children, elementary age children. And all of a sudden she realizes, oh no, gonna be a whole nother set of problems. Like they're gonna want to rebel even more. Like there's, because a couple of her children are aging up into where they're having a whole host of new complications that come with becoming a teenager, and and she realizes that, oh, like, and it kind of hits her as this like kick in the gut, even though she has this other immediate problem that she needs to deal with. There's just this looming dread of the future hanging over her, of what she's going to do as things keep changing and progressing. So yeah, it's
but
a pretty dystopian situation
it's
for
it's
sure.
hard, like we've all had interactions with children. It's hard to like express the gravity of situations when like you're going through that rebellious phase. You're not going to listen, and you don't realize when it's like, oh, if you do this you will die. Like there
Mhm.
is like that, they're not going to grasp that until they see it, and then it's going to be panic, and you're going to have to claw back from that. And no, I didn't envy their situation.
Or even just the weapons grade cringe that was, is it pronounced Noker or Nokwer or
Oh
something
yeah,
like
yeah, no car. Yeah.
yeah, the wee guy that approaches her like, no, this is what men do with women. And I was like, oh, oh God, son, oh no.
Yeah, that was bad.
And that's just again another weight on her shoulders of like, God, how do I deal with this? And it's not just and it's not just that it's a individual that you have an awkward experience with and you can be like, okay, well, I'm not gonna, deal with that anymore. This is a person that lives with you, you're responsible for their safety. So how do and so all these stresses upon her ultimately lead to disaster, because it's just at a certain point it's just one thing too many.
Mhm.
And I emphasize early on, in the very first chapter, she is well aware one little slip. I can't ever afford to not be vigilant. Every second I have to be thinking. I can't behind every smile I have to be always aware of what happens if I make one mistake. And
And it
so when
Yeah.
that one mistake finally happens, it's just heartbreaking. And that's at least to me. And I'm the author, so I definitely feel that heartbreak there.
Well, I feel like dude, there's a few like elements. On one hand, like she's a teacher, but she's very much just like a mother to everybody. So you have all of that on top of also being a teacher, but like it's kind of the way of it just felt like the straw that broke the camel's back. And then once there was one chink in the armor, nothing worked anymore. Like the whole thing collapses. And that was the big one, was that like you couldn't fix one small issue because one small issue was just a domino effect and everything else would crumble afterwards. Like they have the little safe houses and this and that, which in itself was incredibly clever and like a great like way to hide out. But you can't have a family of like 12 in there. Like there's only so
Yeah.
many things you can do.
Yeah,
Um,
and the bigger the children get, the more space they're going to need, just physically,
yeah.
not even just uh so yeah, the restrictiveness of her the solution that she thought she had found to the situation that had worked for, however many years she had been, collecting these students and rescuing them from the streets.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it was destined to always not be able to sustain. There was always an expiration date. It was just a matter of when. And
Yeah.
then the
It's
from there, it's a look into, well, what is she going to do now?
Mhm.
it's something that I've really loved about both of your books that I've read. I don't know anything about We Break Immortals apart from the title, but in Monsters and Kasaban, the world is going through these horrible events and changes and everything, but it's really nothing to do. The characters can't change that. They can't do anything about it. They're dealing with really domestic issues. Like in
Mm,
Monsters, it's my sister, I'm trying to get money. I found this cool thing. And Casaban, it's I got to look after these kids. Man, I got to feed these kids and stuff. It's really normal people with gifts, maybe,
yeah.
dealing with really normal issues that everyone can relate to, but while the world is on fire around them, causing all sorts of problems. But while we're talking about, we touched on this earlier about kids and writing kids and including children in your story. So again, big spoiler warning before we dive into this, but how did you find it? It's something I've never done myself. I don't think so, at least. Uh, Obviously, what happens to some of the kids is absolutely horrible in the book. How did you go about writing that?
The focus for me was on Saya's reaction and on how she handled those situations. Um, becoming a parent, like I've always been felt extreme empathy to the suffering of children and the fear of children even. Like I don't like the idea of kids being afraid or being in pain.
Mhm.
And becoming a parent has just made it so that just that thought is like it has gone from like a thought in my head to a smack in the face every time I encounter a situation like that, whether it be in a story or in media. So it was very difficult for me to write those scenes. Um, and so, what I wanted to focus on in the writing was how Saya continued to look after these children even in those dire moments, and how she like because at one point uh uh she's trying to comfort a child
Mhm.
that she knows isn't going to make it, and she, even in that moment where there's danger all around her, she takes a moment to uh to properly comfort that child, ignoring the danger to her own safety in that moment. And
Yeah.
the strength to do that is what I wanted to show in Saya. And then not just that, but the strength to not give up. Because how can you experience that viscerally and then not want to give up immediately and not want to
Yeah.
just say I can't. There's what else? How am I supposed to stand up to this awful situation and this heartbreak? It's too much. But her strength propels her to be able to keep going in that regard.
And
And
was it, so I just wanted to ask, was it always your intention for this to unfold the way that it did?
um, well, the origins of this story actually is that this was originally intended to be a character that would make their first appearance in a sequel to my debut, We Break Immortals, which is like more of a it's still like a fairly dark fantasy, but it's more of like an epic, sprawling type book.
Mhm.
It's thicker than both Light of Kasaban and Monsters We Feed combined, almost twice as big as them combined. So it's your chunky epic fantasy, but of course within my style, of course. The and my original impetus for this story was just going to be I wanted to introduce this character, but I wanted to write a couple of chapters of just her backstory.
Mhm.
Um, to introduce her. So the story, her original story was just like 3 chapters
Mhm.
of her and introducing these elements and it and introducing her, introducing the children, the setting, the scenario, and it was mostly just to show who this character was and who the children were in her situation, so that she could connect to this other broader story. And as I was writing her story or her chapters, it just kept expanding in my mind. And
Yeah.
I got to a point where I was like, her story is actually more interesting to me
Mhm.
than how she links up with these other characters. So at that point I was like, I want to really explore her story and explore her background and change this to something dedicated to her. And if I need to link her into the other story, I'll write something new along, whatever happens next to her. But I wanted this to be her story alone, uh, and really explore the depth of it, and the depth of her as a character. I felt like her character was so profound to me that it deserved more than just a couple of passing chapters of intro and then a quick, meet with other established characters. So um, that's kind of how it started, and it but I always planned on her being a teacher. I always planned on her being having students. Excuse me, I'm sorry, and being in this environment. I had not elaborated the environment, but I had always planned on her being in a city that had been overtaken by this, because this all of my books take place in the same world, even ones that aren't
Yeah.
directly sequels or relevant to each other. Um, and that will continue with other books that I write, either direct sequels to Light of Kasaban or to Monsters We Feed or We Break Immortals. They'll all still exist in the same world. All new books will exist in this world, whether they touch each other or not. Like Monsters We Feed takes place about 25 years before We Break Immortals, and it connects to some of those characters, but it's not like a prequel. Like it's not a story
Yeah.
that affects any outcome other than that. I just like to uh, put in Easter eggs and show connections between the various stories and places and things like that. Um, and so, to that extent, um, I really wanted to get back to my main point. I really wanted to explore Saya as the character before I get
Yeah.
too far on a tangent. I wanted to explore her as a character and really, really get focus in on her. But the priests, for example, of the ministry, that was always there. They were always going to be the force over the city because they're a force all over the world that I've created. Um, and they're the way that they appear takes a different shape depending on what kingdom or empire or whatever. Like there are parts of the world where there are no priests, where they're banned. There are parts of the world where the priests are allowed, but only in an advisory capacity. Then there are places, like in Kasaban, where the priests are the sole arbiters of justice and any outcome whatsoever. And so I always planned on that, but I did not have the depth of them explored, and I didn't even have a named or identified villain in the story originally. Like they were just kind of the priests were there, and they're what she's hiding out from, and that was kind of the extent of it. It wasn't until I decided to really zero in on her as a character and her situation that I really got into the nitty gritty detail of just how awful um, these antagonists are
Mm.
towards her and towards all the people of her city. To be honest.
I really love how like the impetus for the villain is that he really wants a promotion kind of thing. Like
Yeah,
he
yeah,
himself,
Yeah.
he's just
Yeah,
quite bad.
I, yes, because in all honesty, my opinion is that's the vast majority of evil in the world.
Yes,
It's just,
the
is
banality of
just
evil.
yeah, the banality of evil. Yeah, is just somebody who wants to get ahead for their own ego or for their own pocketbook or both, and other things fall to the wayside, and sometimes even to the point where even their humanity falls to the wayside. And
Yeah,
so originally I was like, I need a villain who I really need to set up this and give face, name, and voice to this looming presence, because there's more than one priest and more than one, and they have a whole host of servants and servitors and informants and uh, enforcers throughout this city. But I wanted to put a face to them. I wanted to put like a person at the top of that, and that's where Sebastian Carta came from. And uh, and I had challenged myself to set up and see if I can show exactly how awful of a person this is in 2 pages. And so I made his introduction to this story. I was like, I'm going to make his introduction to the story. I'm going to make him. I think he's chapter 2. or chapter 3, if my memory serves. Um,
Chapter.
right up front is just his intro is 2 pages, and everyone I've talked to, literally everyone, is like, "Yep, nailed it. This is
He's the leader.
I've almost never encountered a villain I hate more than him, and I don't know how that was able to come across in just like a page and a half or whatever." So,
I think that comes back to the point we made at the very beginning of this, of just about how this is a world where everyone's set up against you. You're set up to fail. Like it's so dog eat dog. Everyone's looking out for themselves. Like everyone's just in survival mode, which is not unlike aspects of the world we all live in. Like a lot of this is rooted in fact and rooted in reality. It's just obviously taken to the nth degree. But when you frankly humanize someone by giving them their own hopes and aspirations of I want this promotion or this or that, it makes them a much more real character. It makes them
mhm.
much like it's much easier to hate someone who it's like, oh wait, no, that I can see that happening.
Yeah,
We've all
and
been
that,
affected by some boss
yes.
or some employee or whatnot who's like stepping on your back behind your back to get up leg up and this and that.
And that's why I introduced that aspect of his character in a separate chapter later on,
Mhm.
because I wanted to elaborate on his evil. Like I wanted to show that he is callous and cruel, and a religious a zealot, of course. But then later on, I wanted to show that underpinning this is his own ego, and
I love the
the
monologue, and I love
reason that
the
his cruelty is up to 11, and his uh, awfulness is up to 11, is ultimately comes back to his own ego. Like his zealotry is a result of his own ego. And I wanted to put that in there to show just how awful he was as a
it
person.
can't
So
just kill you. It has to showboat the whole time he's
Mhm.
killing you and tell you
Mhm.
why he's right to be killing you. It's just he's the worst man. I really hate. I was really spoilers again. I was really, if I could change one thing about it, I wish he'd been like permanently blinded at the end
mhm.
or something. In a way, what happened to him was like what happens to bad guys in like a kid's story where he gets away, but he's ruined.
Mhm.
He's not his promotion. He's been passed over. No one respects him now. I really was it tempting to just have something like absolutely horrifying happen to him for how
um,
easy.
there is more to that story to come.
Yes.
There is more to Saya's story and more to her story with him, because I leave it for very open ended at the end.
Yeah.
And and we're in spoiler territory, but she has switched from hunker down and hide and arm myself and encase myself in a fortress of safety to, okay, we're on the run now. We're doing this. And how am I gonna adapt to this wholly new situation? But there is a lot more to her story that has already been written, that I'm already working on, and I do have plans not just for her and for Carter, but also plans for a return to Kasaban potentially.
Okay.
Phenomenal. Because I've been one of the things that I wrote, and we've only got about 6 minutes left, so I don't want to take too long. I'll hammer through the next couple of things quickly. I'd written in my notes, my God, at some point we better get like this better be working towards like an Avenger style team up between all the characters that I've really loved so far. Because it seems like it's heading in the direction of like some big there's storylines converging, even if it's not immediately obvious. Tell
Yeah,
me that I'm right.
yeah. So with regards to that, the story, there will be convergence of some stories and some characters, um, both ones that have already been published and ones that are forthcoming. But yeah, I always planned on having uh now the extent of it, of how much of it will be in solo books, like will there be a follow-up solo story about Saya, or whether it will just move to her appearing now in the big fantasy story or not. Even if she does that, I may still release just a little short of her chapters, because I have a new intro for her into that world, which is the intro of her being on the run for the first time. That I may just make that a little book of its own, even if it is folded into the main series, just for just for if people are for people who are solely interested in seeing Saya move forward only. I may do that a little bit, but yeah, her story is going to continue. Sebastian Carta, yeah, he deserves way more than just being
Yeah,
temporarily blinded. So there will be repercussions for him,
Mm.
for sure, and
good.
and further dangers for Saya because as you know, he's the kind of person who does not take being slighted well.
Mm.
Like, he's being berated by his superiors and he's contemplating, I wish I could just
Mhm.
kill my superiors and just take their position instead of going through all this rigmarole. So he's definitely the kind of person who holds a grudge and is willing to follow that across borders for sure.
And I think,
I really love. Yeah, I'll make this because I would really, if we had another half an hour, I'd love to dive into the magic system
Oh
because
yeah,
the
sure.
the
that too. There's always so much to
two
talk
books,
about.
Yeah.
yeah, the link between the two books in this box that we put Kasaban in was that they both had really distinctive and unique magic systems, and I always loved the way that your magic system just basically ties into like real world physics. You can change properties of matter and things like that in light. But what I really loved about Kasaban was that the main character didn't have like she can't shoot fire, she can't manipulate, she can't throw objects with her mind. She's got light, and that's it, which is a really underrated power. And I love the way it was used. I've done it myself in some books, like you give the main character powers or abilities that are not immediately apparent as powerful or
Mhm.
anything like that. Was did you deliberately do that to kind of limit yourself and force a bit of
Yes.
creativity?
Yeah, I wanted, well, for two reasons, and I'll be as quick as I can. Hopefully, no tangents this time. I really wanted her power to be a defensive power, and to match the theme of her whole concept of wanting to remain hidden, and that being her defense mechanism is to remain hidden. So I wanted it to be a defensive magic, and for her to gradually discover ways that she can use that to her advantage and potentially also make it into offensive
Uh-huh.
magic to cause problems for people. That's forthcoming. So I do have plans for her and for her skills to increase.
So, on that, because we only have 2 minutes left, I wanted to ask for readers that did like The Light of Kasaban, what's the best way they can get a hold of you? What would you recommend they read next?
Well, my website is just thomashowardriley.com.
Mm.
I'm available there. I am on Instagram and BlueSky as Thomas Howard Riley, and I'm on Twitter as Ornithopteryx.
It's a tough
And
spell.
yeah, so I'm like, because that was my, just my handle from, many years ago, and it just carried over. But that's where I can be followed. I do have a newsletter there, and I'll be releasing some information there. If you really are into the dark noir aspect of it and the aspect of like the setting being a character in the story, the way Casaban and its heat and oppressiveness is a character, I would say Monsters We Feed. Uh,
Yeah, boy.
uh, it is also a dark story, but it has heartfelt elements. Like there's heart inside, and a lot of things I try to do is instead of making characters that are nice and that turn into dead inside people, I like to take people who are practically dead inside and try to bring them back to being people who can make friends. So I kind of take the opposite track of a lot of grimdark type stuff. But they are dark stories, but with heart at the
Dark stories, but
center of it.
very redemptive. Very redemptive. A lot of redemption
Mhm.
or
Yes, correct, correct,
to get
all
through the
around.
darkness. Thing. Yeah.
But
And then if
on
you like just pure dark epic fantasy, We Break Immortals is the way to go. That's my big
That's,
chunky book.
on that note, we've got about 15 seconds left. Thank you again so much, Tom. It was lovely to meet you. Finally got this conversation going. But if you made it this
Yes,
far,
yes.
Light of Kazaban, go read it. And thanks again, guys. Have a lovely day.
Thank you guys for having me.
have a
It
good
was
one,
awesome.
guys.